So what we have here today in the garage is my 1983 Honda Goldwing GL1100. So as you can see, the fairings and the baskets and stuff are off. And I never bothered recording that because my buddy John was here and was giving me a hand with a couple things. And he had to go, so I never bothered setting up the camera because of the time. But as you can see to this point, the radiator and whatnot is off. Everything's out of the way, so we're ready to start doing some work on the motor. I'll just turn you around quickly. If we look at the lift here, you can see front fairing, radiator, bash guards, and then in under the tripod next to my lathe there are all the baskets. So I'm going to stick you guys back in the tripod. I'll give you a quick background on this, let you know what we're going to do, and then we'll get down to doing it. So yesterday when we left off, I had a few preliminary things done. We got all this front fairing off, and you saw that previously. I got the rad off because even though these timing belts are replaceable with the radiator on, I just like things being much easier. So instead of being able, or trying to get in and get finicky between like the radiator and the timing belt cover, I just took the rad off, and then we can put all new fluids in it once we're done, and that'll be fantastic. It'll just be another thing done. So I just took the seat off. I'm now going to take off the fake gas tank, the gas tank cover here. That way when I put the rad on, I can get at the filler cap on the rad and fill that up again. Here's our two new timing belts. So I'm going to pull the tank off, and we'll go ahead and pull these covers off and get ready to replace these belts. So there's our tank. As you can see, if I pop my autofocus back on, bring you guys back in a bit. It's essentially just a cover for a bunch of electronics, a fuse block, or the reservoir for the overflow for the radiator. So you can actually fill the radiator from up here. This was empty when I took everything off the bike. Air box is here, and here's our gas tank sitting in right here. So now that that's off, we can get at all this stuff nice and easy. Ah, here's the cap. I thought that was gone. Now that we know we can get at this stuff relatively easy, when I go put the radiator back on, I actually have access to where the cap comes up through here. I'll be able to get that hose, the feed hose from the reservoir down, the overflow back on, and it should be relatively straightforward. So now that all this stuff is out of the way, we've got nice unfettered access to the front of the motor down here. So let's go ahead, talk quickly about the timing belt change, then we'll actually do it. Before I get into actually taking these covers off, there's a lot of dirt and grime along here, along the top of the covers. So I'm just going to give these a quick once over wipe down with a rag with some brake clean on it. So I don't want anything falling in where the belts are going to be, as this is a very important part of the motor on these bikes. So I went ahead and got my timing covers off, and these belts are in really good shape, the belts that are already on it. So I'm trying to decide if I really want to change these or not. I know some people might say, well, you're already in there, it's just as well change them. But honestly, these belts, the teeth on them look new. So I got a feeling that this belt was done within the last few thousand kilometers of this bike's life. Had to have been. They are just in such good condition. After some deliberation, I've decided I might as well change these, since I've gone this far, to take everything off and get at them. So what I'm going to do now is we're currently looking at the top of the motor here. Back here is the timing cover. So we can take this off with a large screwdriver, and you can see the flywheel, and you'll see an indication on this side, on the left side of it, and that'll be the index mark. So what we can do is right here, I guess over this way, is the stator cover, the alternator, and there's a cover on the back that we can remove, and once we remove that, we can get a 12mm socket on the end of the alternator shaft, and we can use that to turn the motor over. So we'll turn it over to T1, top dead center, for cylinder 1. We'll double check and make sure all our cam gears are lined up. I'll do a couple quick marks with a paint pen just so we know where things need to be, and we'll go ahead and start changing belts. So just to give you guys a quick once over regarding what we're doing with regard to this timing stuff. Here's a small socket with a 12mm, or a small socket wrench with a 12mm socket. It's on the bolt there on the inside of the alternator. Like I said, you only turn this clockwise. If you turn it counterclockwise and loosen that off accidentally, you're going to have a lot of issues. So now if we come up here and look down at the timing marks, you'll see there's a T, and this is for 1. You'll see a T1 or an F1T and an F2T as you're rotating this around. And keep in mind that when you put the T for 1 on that mark, go around and have a look, because I'll explain it to you when we look at where the gears and the belts are now. We look at this gear currently, you can see this is in the right position. This is up. Our timing mark over here is lined up with the timing mark on the case. But it's possible that you could be 180 out with the T1 mark lined up with that index mark as well. So make sure when you do that T1 mark line up on the flywheel back on the other side of the motor there, you come over and have a look. This will be up, will be facing down this way, and your R will be upside down over here. So make sure that you get that in the right orientation. Either way, now that that is done, I'm gonna go ahead and go back to the other camera, and we'll start getting these tensioners loosened up so we can get those belts off and get the new belts on. So here I've got a simple paint pen. Let me autofocus this back for you. This is a, come on baby. This is a simple Hobart Welding Products paint pen. I use this when I'm working on metal and I want to mark steel and stuff, when I'm cutting and measuring and the like. By the way, we'll give that a shake. And as you can see here, probably, as I've noticed anyways, someone has already marked this, and it was marked with black Sharpie. So that is telling me once again that these belts probably were done not too long ago, and looking at the condition of teeth here, they are looking really good. But either way, seeing as we're in here and I got 2 brand new belts, I'll do it, and then I know when it was done, and then I'll know when to do it next time. So simply come in here, paint mark there, paint mark there, and now we know our timing is good on this side. Things are lined up so the cam and the crank should be where they need to be. I'm going to go over to the other side, put another touch of paint marker on that side so that side is marked as well, and then we can finally start taking these belts off. So now that I've gone ahead and made a few marks, I made some extra marks. So you can see on this side there's one on the top and one on the right. Over here did the same thing, top and left. The belt direction on these, if you're looking down from the top, is this way toward the left side of the bike for both. I also got a 1 mark made right here and on the top of the crank shaft here. That way we know everything is lined up properly. So now the procedure for this is loosen off the bolts on both of these tensioners. Once those are loosened, we can take the right belt off, which is over here on your left, and then the left belt off, which is over here on your right. We can go ahead and give these tensioners a little inspection, make sure the bearings and stuff sound good in those. And if we're all well and good, we'll be ready to put our new belts back on. Now, there are lots of videos of how to do this on YouTube. There's one especially good one. I'll link it now. I can't remember the guy's name, but you should go check that out if it's something you're doing, because that's what I first looked at. And then the second thing I'm going to say is there's a link to my website in the description as well, where I have the manual for this motorcycle, and you can follow along in the manual, which is also another thing that I'm doing as well to make sure I do this correctly. So, that being said, fast forward time, I'm going to loosen these bolts off, and we'll get these belts changed. One thing to note is the cam gear on the right side is going to turn back on you a bit. That's not a big deal, because when we put the new belt back on, we'll just make sure this is back over in position where it needs to be. And we made those marks earlier, so this should line up exactly where it needs to be when we put our belt back on. Either way, we'll let that go back slightly. Take the other side off. This side should not do that. So once everything's out of the way, you just want to check your rollers, make sure they're good. These feel fantastic, so I'm happy with how those feel. I just went ahead and disconnected the springs here to get those belts off a little easier. So now installation is the opposite of removal. So we'll start and get the left side belt on. Once that's on, we'll get our tensioner on that side set up. We'll come over and put our right belt on, making sure that we get that cam sprocket rotated down where it needs to be for when we install it. And then we should be good to go. So, here we go. Let's get those belts back on. Now that we got those new belts installed, I'm going to go ahead, put my 12mm socket back in on that alternator bolt. We'll rotate the motor around and ensure that once we get a full 1 revolution of the entire motor through the whole 4-stroke process, we'll come back and check that our marks are all lined up. So our crank, the couple marks on the left-hand side gear, and the couple marks on the right-hand side gear. So I'm going to turn this over, give it a peek, and we'll see how it goes. So that's our one full revolution of the motor using that alternator bolt. We see our crankshaft mark lines up, as well as the indication marks we marked over here. Note that this one and this mark here was put there by someone else previously, and then there's our marks on this side as well, also lining up. So I'm just going to double check and make sure our springs are connected, those tensioner bolts are snug down. We'll go ahead and we'll clean up those covers, we'll get the covers back on, and we'll call the timing belts done. So one last thing I want to do at a convenience, either for myself or for the next guy, is I'm just going to mark the date in this paint pen on the belt here. So it is 2021, 6th month. I think today's the 6th day. Let's have a look. It is June 6th. Okay, so 2021-06-06. Programmers love year, month, day. Could be me, could be some other guy, but I'm sure whoever it is, they'll appreciate the fact that the date that these belts are on was marked on one of these belts. So I'll just give you guys a quick before and after regarding the getting these cleaned up. There's still a bit of old RTV and stuff in this I'm going to scrape off before I put some new stuff on. You can see here's the one that hasn't been cleaned yet. Still full of all kinds of gunk and shit, a bit of rubber and stuff probably from the old belts that were in there. And here's the new one I got all cleaned up. It's looking nice and shiny. So, and then the other side, you know, I did the best I could. These are pretty old. They probably need to be painted at some point, but that point ain't right now. So I'm just getting this thing running and working for me for the rest of the summer. So, send you guys away. I'll get this one cleaned up. We'll have a look at the gaskets, make sure they're cleaned up and ready to go back on. Then we'll get the front back together. So as you can see, I've got my relatively cleaned up covers. I cleaned up the gaskets that were all still good. Things are sealed up nice, so I got that all back together now. So, timing belts are done. So I was thinking, and I think for this summer, just for ease of reassembly and also because this looks really badass without it, I'm going to go with not putting the front fairing back on this bike. So I'm just going to work through taking the front fairing mount. I've got this all unbolted. There's a couple spots back here where I still need to remove a couple small tin shrouds on either side. Then this should slip right on out. And then regarding front headlight, because the front headlight is in the front fairing on this, I'll just simply have to make up a couple clamps and get myself a new front headlight that I can hook up and have set up out here. And that should be fantastic. Now that the bracketry for the front fairing is all gone and out of the way, I'm ready to go ahead and put the radiator back on the bike. So, this may be a bit of a struggle, it may not. You're about to find out. Now that the rad is all reinstalled, I've got the water pump connection down bottom hooked up, the hose returned to the top of the motor here connected, and our little return hose from the overflow connected up here. I'm ready to go ahead and fill the bike with coolant and give it a first start now since we replaced those belts. So I'm going to grab some coolant, we're going to fill this puppy up, kick it over, and see how she does. So here's first fire since doing the timing belts. The light's going to be shit because I got the garage door open. I want to make sure this exhaust goes out. She does still smoke a bit. I'm probably going to have to do valve stem oil seals once I'm done the carbs. But either way, we're going to get it started up, see if it burps itself. We'll take care of the rest of filling up the coolant. Seems like she's running good, a little bit of smoke. Like I said, we're probably going to have to look at valve stem oil seals because that smoke is blue, telltale sign of that. So, at this point now, I'm ready to pull the carbs and have a quick look at those. And then once we're done with that, then it's going to be valve stem oil seals, and then finally brakes. So that's been a few hours of effort here today on the 83 Goldwing. So just to reiterate, before we jump into next day, $500, bought this bike, running bike, just did the timing belts on it. You can see things are still fantastic. Decided front fairings aren't going back on. So here's the list of things we're looking at doing next. Double check the front brake and the back brakes, make sure all that's good. One of the screws on the master cylinder up here is completely pooped, so I'm going to have to slot that to get it out and get some replacement screws for that. There are no rear brakes right now at all. Nothing. So that's probably leaky master cylinder, empty master cylinder, something along those lines. The pedal is extremely stiff as well, so we'll have to deal with that. You saw it runs, but it smokes a little, so I want to take the carbs off, go through those, make sure all is well. And then I think I'm also going to go ahead and order a set of valve stem oil seals when I go in now. Hopefully we can get them in about a week. And you can do the valve stem oil seals on these motors without even having to take the heads off. There's a pretty cool little trick you can do to get those off. So I'll see you tomorrow when we're ready to dive into the rest of this.